Good morning, room 219. We are going to continue our work on social studies today by reading chapters 19 and 20 of our book, Guns for General Washington. So go ahead and grab your book so you can follow along with this read aloud. And make sure that if you don't have your book, go ahead and pause the video so you can follow along once you have it, okay? All right, so I'm going to begin. Chapter 19 is called The Runaway. Chapter 20 is called The Chasm. Okay? So chapter 19 begins on page 106. I have another gatecrasher today, guys, so let me introduce you to Laika today. Some of you might have remembered her from another video, but Laika is visiting us today. Say hi to the class, Laika. This is my oldest beagle. Say hi. All right, Mama, go ahead. Time to go. All right, let's go ahead and start this video then, okay? All right. The Runaway. Heave away, ho! Heave away, ho! The men bent their backs to the job while Will called the tempo. When the gun was halfway up the slope, he signaled a pause. Holding the taut rope with one hand, he used the other to dash sweat from his eyes. He was dripping wet in spite of the cold. His back ached and his shoulders burned with pain. So they're carrying these cannons up what? Do you guys remember where we stopped? What they were going to cross now? Are they crossing rivers anymore? No, they are not. They are going to cross the mountain range now. So if you're going to cross a mountain range without roads, what are they going to have to do with these cannons now? Yep, they're going to have to drag them up the mountain. This is not going to be easy. After a short rest, Will grabbed the rope with both hands and started his crew working again. Heave away, ho! Heave away, ho! The teamsters had been at it all day, struggling through an area called Greenwoods, a 12-mile stretch thick with evergreen trees. There were no marked routes here, only a vague Indian footpath snaking across hill and dale. There's no way around all of this, Henry said to Will. No possible detour. We have to imitate the Indians. Go straight up and over. First, the men cut down the smaller trees and chopped away the underbrush, creating a wide path up the steep incline. So, it's a steep incline. Let's talk about that for a minute. So, if you had to haul a cannon over a mountain, you would think this is pretty simple. And you're right, it is. It's not too bad. This is the opposite of steep. This is low incline, if you will. This is a low incline. We're talking about a steep incline. So we're talking maybe more along these lines. Now this is a steep incline. This would make it a whole lot harder. Right? All right, let's continue. Then one by one, with extra men on each side to help, the lighter loads were pulled up the slope by the animals. It was slow going, but finally the small guns were all at the top. A different plan was needed for the heavy cannons. The horses and oxen were unhinged and led up the slope. Excuse me. Then the big weapons were rigged with long ropes. These were carried up the hill, looped around stout trees, and brought back down to the work parties. Finally, each gun was hauled up, pulley-style, inch by inch. Will and his crew had been hoisting a 13-pounder, and they were relieved when the gun finally reached the summit. Nearby, a second party was at work, raising a giant brass siege mortar, and they chanted together as they heaved on the straining rope. Resting on the ground, Will watched the mortar crew. Young John Becker was climbing toward them, carrying a bucket and a tin dipper. Pa thought you might fancy a drink, J.P. said to William. Gratefully, the men gulped the clear spring water, and some tipped the dipper over their heads, letting the cool liquid run over their sweaty faces and necks. Then, after they'd had their fill, J.P. hefted his bucket and started toward the next group. "Ho! Look out!" There were sudden shouts and loud crashes. Everyone turned and stared. The rope holding the siege mortar had parted, and the gun came hurtling down the hillside. So what happened here? Why is the gun falling? That's right, the rope broke. So now everyone underneath is in danger, and also it depends how far they go down. They're going to have to bring that thing back up. Shouting and swearing, the men scrambled as the heavy gun crashed downhill. It felt like a juggernaut, a mad brass beast, bounding and bouncing wildly off the rocks and tree stumps. Wow, that's a great word, juggernaut. Any ideas of what a juggernaut is? A juggernaut is something that's mentioned in mythology. It's sort of like a monster where it's a great big beast, if you will, that would only get stronger the more it moves. So if you have something that is heavy going downhill and keep going downhill, what's going to happen to the speed? Let's talk a little bit of science. It's going to get faster and it's going to get harder to stop. So that's what they're comparing the juggernaut to the what? To the cannon, right? So that means the cannon is like a juggernaut. As it's going downhill, it's becoming more and more dangerous. All right, let's continue. I just had to stop for that one word. Smash, crack, boom! Down it came, faster than fear. A solid ton of doom, crushing everything in its way. J.P., carrying his water bucket, saw the mortar racing toward him. As he turned to run, his foot caught on a tree root, and he went sprawling. Cannons headed towards him, and now he's trapped. Will streaked over to J.P. He dove, grabbed him, and fell to one side, with the boy as the juggernaut hurtled by, missing them by inches. The bucket that J.P. had dropped was smashed to splinters. I think we're okay with the bucket being smashed and not J.P., right? But by inches that cannon missed them. Good job, Will. With a thud, the cannon came to a rest in the stream at the foot of the hill. So it's back at the bottom of the hill, guys. So they're going to have to do it all over again, too, on top of everything. Its muzzle gaped at the sky. The young boy coughed and sat up slowly. The breath knocked out of him. There was a gash on his forehead, and blood trickled down his cheek. Grunting, Will also sat up, clutching a badly bruised knee. The men came running. They crowded around, all talking at once, as they helped the dazed pair up to their feet. J.P. thanked Will haltingly, stumbled shyly over his words. Pa Becker grabbed Will's hand and pumped it vigorously. Henry pounded him on the back. That was quick thinking, he said to Will. The colonel tried to sound gruff, but he beamed with pride at his younger brother. Later, they climbed down the hill and looked at the runaway cannon lying in the stream. This is the last one, the colonel said. So, let's start moving it. And this time, I want it double roped. With the mortar finally rigged, Will sat still limping, insisted on pacing the crew. He grabbed the rope while the others fell in behind him. Then he began to chant, "Heave away, ho! Heave away, ho!" The brass mortar crept slowly up the rough slope. Will Knox's strong voice, calling the time, rose in the mountain air and drifted through the silent pines. So they got all the cannons, up the hill. They still got a long way to go, but no lives have been lost. So that's the upside. Now we're up to chapter 20, the chasm, on page 111. Now, do you want to know what a chasm is? Well, if you said it's like a big, deep hole in the mountainside, then yes, you're right. And if you didn't know, well, now you know. All right, so let's see what happens at the chasm. Not a very long chapter. From the upper window at the headquarters, Washington could see Howe's troop ships in a harbor. For a while he studied them with his telescope. Then he closed the glass and went downstairs. Outside his office door, a sentry snapped to attention. Washington took note of the man's smart appearance and drew comfort from it. Yes, the Continental Army was making its progress. It was beginning to look like a real fighting force, but they still needed artillery in order to fight. That's another great word, sentry. So let's take a moment and let's see if you can figure it out with the context clues. Outside his office door, the sentry snapped to attention. So who or what would be outside the office door of George Washington? If you said a soldier, you're right. Sentry is just a synonym for soldier. At his desk, Washington stared at the calendar and frowned. Time was running out. From his spies in Boston, he knew that the British reinforcements weren't top-grade troops. But there were quite a lot of them. Even now, for how to launch his attack, the commander drummed his fingers on his desk. I'm not good at it. Some of you are better at it than me. Where the blazes was Knox and his cannons? How much longer could they wait? Taking a fresh sheet of paper, he began a note for General Schuyler in Albany. He mentioned that the enemy's reinforcements, which worried him. Then he confided, I am in hopes that Colonel Knox will arrive with the artillery in a few days. It is much needed. Tai Chi! Uh-oh, we got another gate crasher. Tai Chi, do you want to come here? Nah, he's okay. Alright, let's continue. Oh wait, maybe he climbed out? Tai Chi! Come here. Let me introduce you to my second beagle. Tai Chi, come here, boy. Nah. He went to sleep. He's a sleepy hound. Sorry about that, guys. Well, I would love to see some of your pets if you've got some during our Google Meet. Just don't make it a long thing, okay? Alright, let's continue. The general would have been even more worried if he had known that while he sat writing, Henry and his men were facing another crisis. So from crossing rivers to going up mountains, they have another problem. The convoy, which had fought its way over the hills past the mountain hamlet of Otis and the village of Blandford, their goal was Westfield, on the east slope of the Berkshire Range. From Westfield, the path would be easier, but right now, they were on the rim of a steep chasm that dropped straight down for hundreds of feet. The travelers were at a dead halt. They'd met up with the bad terrain before, but never anything this dangerous. Standing at the edge, looking over, the drivers shook their heads and grumbled to each other. Finally, an old-timer named Thorne spoke up. "'Tain't any way to get down this cliff, Colonel. No, sir. Not a man amongst us says it can be done." Henry frowned. "I know it's bad, but the ridge runs south clear to Connecticut. There's no way around, not for miles. We'll have to take a chance." Thorne grunted. "All of us is strong for a cause, Colonel, but we didn't sign up for suicide." Another driver chimed in. "Just getting the animals down is nigh impossible, and if a load ever broke loose, then there'd be blue ruin for sure." The argument went back and forth for almost 3 hours. Henry coaxed and pleaded, but the men wouldn't budge. Will began to think that the mission was doomed. All their work had been for nothing. But the colonel refused to quit, and his stubbornness plus some practical new ideas from Will saved the day. The men agreed at last to tackle the chasm, though few of them expected to succeed. William's plan of action matched the one they used before, but this time he added many safeguards. Animals were unhitched, then they were led, sliding and slipping down the steep incline. Meanwhile, the vehicles were rigged with heavy ropes, which were looped around big trees. Drag chains and guy ropes were added to help the crews steady the load as they went downhill. Now, under the colonel's sharp eye, each gun was lowered little by little. Every 50 feet, fat logs were wedged under the wheels and runners to hold the loads in place. Then the men ran ahead and shifted the heavy ropes to trees further down the slope. The tricky process was then repeated. So they are going to literally slide these cannons downhill on logs using ropes and chains to slow down the fall. And then as it's going down this incline, the men will go ahead and go down, another team, and tie ropes somewhere further lower down to reattach it to the cannons and lower it down again. So it was a lot of work, and very dangerous work, but it is a possibly feasible plan to solve this problem. They must have been very nervous. I'm nervous because I know this happened in real life, in history anyway. Tells you how people were back then. Okay, let's see. Then the men... Okay, J.P. Becker, working alongside the older hands, kept an eye on his hero, Will. Excuse me. In spite of his bad knee, the colonel's brother was everywhere, limping along the ridge, giving orders, testing ropes, making sure that every gun moved safely. The troopers and drivers, remembering that the runway cannon, worked hard and took no foolish chances. There were a few snags and tense moments, but no accidents. As the long hours passed and the men's confidence grew, and even Thorne had to admit that the colonel had been right, they were beating the chasm. By nightfall, the whole artillery train was safely at the foot of the great hill. Not a single gun had been lost, nor a man injured. And at that point, Henry called a halt. "I'm right proud of us all," he said to the crew. "Let's eat supper and get a good night's rest." It was one decision over which there were no arguments. All right, so that was our read aloud. You can go ahead and reread it again if you need to. I'm going to send you 2 questions on this assignment to answer. Use the video and the book to help you. And until I see you later today. All right? Bye, 219.